live. There we go. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It's a slow start this morning. What can I say? Oh dear. And welcome to Tuesdays with Peter. I'm Peter J. Redding. I'm a professional coach. I'm a professional coach trainer, coach supervisor, coach assessor, and as most of you know now that have listened to any part of my weekly broadcast, there's three masteries that I am particularly fascinated with. Self-mastery, number one, the topic of self-mastery, first on the list. Number two is coaching mastery. And the third one is learning mastery. And that's the area that we're looking at in this series right now. How do we create a learning environment that is, I'm going to say innately safe, innately supportive, innately designed, that maximizes a person's curiosities to learn about X, learn about blank, learn about whatever it is that they are learning about. And so we've been talking about the subject matter. We talked about that in last week's session. In this week's session, we're going to be talking about the subject matter and a component of it that's called the competencies. In other words, if I am teaching, if I am educating, if I'm inspiring people to learn about leadership, parenting, how to run a big piece of machinery, how to drive a car, how to cook a meal. It can be a million different things that we learn over the course of a lifetime. What kind of environment do we need to create for that so that we don't get in the way of the learning process? Yep, and I just froze. I get so excited. All right, so let's see if we can't get that corrected. Let me there we go. Do one thing there, do one thing there, and I think we're corrected. Super. All right, so how do we get out of the way of the learner's learning? And put very simply, and here's my thesis. Here's what I have been working with for the last 26 years in the terms of the inspired learning model. The inspired learning model tips the way of feedback during a learning process upside down. Now, in all of my education, whether it's be home education from my mom and dad, or society's education of what was going on around me, or in formal school, first grade, second grade, third grade, all the way up through university, all the way up through graduate school, all the way through corporate training and adult learning, and so on and so forth. The unspoken underlying guideline that was in full force during all of those experiences of my learning was we have an obligation to tell Peter when he's not doing it right. So he can go and get it corrected. He can go and study it. He can go practice it. He can correct that part of the subject matter so that he gets it right. That sound familiar? It's the classic example I use in terms of, a person getting their arithmetic sheet back with 10 examples, the homework. Teachers got -2 on the top, indicating the 2 that were wrong. And they're circled, or there's an X through them in red. So it's like, wah, 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 wah. Go down to this one and this one. Those are obviously wrong. Let's get those corrected, and then we've got them all right. I don't know how that got spread around the world, but that's gone viral long before all the COVID stuff. We have to, as an educator, point out that which the student got wrong so they can go back and correct it. Now, like I said, I've turned that upside down, an inspired learning model, and said, what if we didn't do it that way? What if we said, okay, so let's look for all the things that the student got right, correct, in accordance with the mastery of that particular learning environment, or that particular learning topic, and acknowledge him for this. Wow, you got this right, you got this right, you got this right, you got this right, you got that right. This is fantastic. I mean, this is just brilliant. When we talk about this particular competency, this is a great example of how it's demonstrated in blank, in cooking, in coaching, in building a house, in whatever. Yeah. And I've been doing that for 25 years with spectacular success. And I'm talking about taking highly educated human beings that have gone to some of the best schools in literally the universe. And within 4 or 5 days, they have morphed, learned, assimilated, grokked concepts, precepts, competencies of a particular subject matter faster, quicker, easier, and more integrated than they ever have in their entire lifetime, because of this change of what I am focusing on, what I am acknowledging, and allowing the sheer joy of learning to come through that learning process. It's like, oh wow, I'm getting it. All right, let me go back and try it again. Yeah. We've had little or no finances to do any major research on this, but the little bit of research that was done at Johns Hopkins University, I did a summer institute there back in, I think, 2005. And one of the grad students that was taking the summer institute had already had her master's degree in higher education, had been teaching, I think, for 10 or 12, maybe 15 years. She experimented with this and said, this can't possibly be right. I've been educating for a long time. So she ran a study on 2 groups of students that she had the previous year. So she knew all the students. She was an outstanding teacher. But it's a new mathematics or curriculum that was going on. I think it was a freshman or sophomore year in high school. And they're all struggling. Two groups of students, 2 different classrooms were struggling with this new curriculum and new mathematics and new way of teaching it that was mandated by the state of Maryland, etc. And she said, okay, so let me test this thing out that Reading has got me, the inspired learning model, whatever the heck that is. And I'm only going to acknowledge the students in one group for what they got right. And good behavior. She had a good behavior, right? In the other group, she taught just like she would normally teach, pointing out and correcting the parts that, in a most generous way and professional way. The bottom line is that at the end of the semester, the group that she only acknowledged what they got right, and this is hard examples of the exercises that they went through. They got it right. She acknowledged that. What they didn't get right, she did not acknowledge that. The group that got the inspired learning model approach had, I think there was like 400% more learning, hardcore learning. They got the examples correct. I think it was like 9 out of the 10 in one group that was the inspired learning group were at a passing level of correct work. Okay, actually being able to calculate the very complex mathematics that were being taught during that semester. The other group that actually started off higher in terms of had more people that were passing early on in the semester. They still grew. I think they grew by 50%. They had like maybe 6 out of 10. You know, they were started at 4, could do the work properly. Then they end up with 6 out of 10 doing the work properly. So they still had, by all measures, classical training teaching methods, a 50% increase in students that were, quote, passing at that higher level of work by the end of the semester. Hip, hip, hooray. And 9 out of 10 that did not get critiqued, but only acknowledged for what they did well. 9 out of 10 were passing a very difficult subject matter in that exact same semester, exact same content in the learning, exact same teacher. So this stuff works. It just does. And if you think about it, one of my jobs as a trainer or as an educator is to celebrate their learning process, their learning journey. And so if I am genuinely and not just a cheerleader, by the way, not just hip hip hooray, you showed up and good for you for showing up today. That's okay too. But specific to, and that's on today's agenda, is to what competencies am I looking for in order to acknowledge them? Otherwise, it's against a blank screen. So the key today is, let me get my PowerPoint up here. Yeah. The subject matter is the second element of the inspired learning model. And part 2 is referring specifically to the competencies. What do we mean by competencies? So that's what we're going to delve into today. Step to develop the competencies. Talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to talk about all of these because it's over the course of time that you go back through, and the last 3 or 4 steps of this is to validate, clarify, update, and so on. But number 1, start with the end in mind. Determine the desired level of mastery. So in any training, I'll use coaching since I'm so familiar with it. There's beginning training, there's middle training or middle advanced training, and then there's mastery training. Okay, so if a student comes to me and they've never received any kind of coach training before, I don't start them off in a master's course because there's all kinds of foundational things that they haven't learned, they don't know about, they're not quite sure how to bring it into their conversations, their practice, talking to a client for the first time. There's so many different things that have to be done at that beginning level. So the question then becomes, for your subject matter, and it might be for a child at home, it might be for a young recruit at work, fresh out of university, first time they've had a professional career job, beginning entry level supervisor maybe, or managerial responsibility, or individual contributor, you know, in the engineering area or in the HR area, whatever. What level are they starting at? What's the level of mastery that we're looking at? And how much time do I have in terms of this training? Is this going to be a 4-hour workshop? Is this going to be a semester-long program where we're going to be meeting once a week for an hour? So what's the level of mastery? Then inside the mastery is, what are the components that they are required? And so here's what do they need to know? Is a good way to ask this. What do they need to know that they don't know now by the end of the training? What do they need to know? What do they need to, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting so excited here. Competencies are made up of 3 different types of components. Number 1 is attitude. what kind of attitude do they need to have, or what we call now in coaching mindset? What kind of a mindset do they need to have in order to perform that particular skill? And what attitude gets in the way? All right, so what kind of attitude am I looking for that particular student, for that particular subject matter? Number two is, what skills what do they need to be able to do? What do they need to be able to do? So in the world of medicines, a doctor, a nurse, a radiology tech, they need to perform specific duties to do their job properly. Now, for some, that's going to take them 15, maybe 20 years to perfect a operation, or it may take them a year and a half to make sure that they do the lab work exactly according to how they're supposed to do it. And it's going to take time for them because it's 45 steps and they have to do them all in sequence, and they have to know exactly what they're doing, and so on and so forth. So what do they need to be able to do to perform that particular piece of work? And the third one is knowledge. Again, what kind of knowledge do they need to have as a backdrop? They need to have the knowledge of human anatomy. Even though a ear, nose, and throat doctor, right, concentrates on basically this part of the body, she, he, they also need to understand how this all interfaces with the rest of the body. So there's a lot of knowledge that's involved with that particular learning, that particular area of life, that particular topic or subject matter. Now, the significance of this is detail. Let me just go through those right here. Deepen your own perception of each component. You think about it, you go, okay, so what else is needed? Some of this is sort of not obvious initially when you do it. So it's like, imagine yourself going back and learning it, whatever you're teaching, now, for the first time that you were learning it, and go, oh yeah, I had confusion around this, or I had confusion around that, or this kind of fell into place in my third year of medical school, or this happened, after a semester of trial and error on the job training for how to delegate properly, etc. Right? So you kind of go through that mind process of, what did I need to learn in order to get to that level of proficiency? And then distill the competencies from the different components. And that's just basically writing them down. So again, for those of you that have been in coaching, and most of you that I see here today have been through my coach training, ICF has got, and I helped develop those first ones back in 1998, I think. But there's like 69 competencies that are necessary to be a good professional coach, and they're all written out. This is how you listen. This is how you ask better questions. This is how you hold a space and make it so that it's not directive. This is how you explore. This is how you support. This is how you follow up at the end in terms of having them choose what's the next action steps, and so on and so forth. And so there's 69 different competencies that now that have been determined as behavioral markers that I can observe as an assessor and say, okay, it was either there or not there, or it was kind of, sort of, maybe getting there a bit, but we need some more developmental work on that. So I want to acknowledge the part that you did, okay, using the inspired learning model. But I don't beat them over the head for what they didn't do. Now, in the assessment, that's a different format. As assessor, I have an obligation to point that out, but as a trainer, I don't. And I have a choice as a trainer to be an inspired learning model trainer and woohoo, hip hip hooray for the things you did well. That's fantastic. All right, so the level of mastery, depending upon the topic, it could be, beginner, middle, end, novice, advanced, master. Could be junior executive, senior vice president, executive, etc. Each kind of field has their own terminology for beginner or for more advanced and more masterful way of doing it. So pick out the level of mastery, and that's generally pretty easy. I'm going to be working with people that are just getting into coaching. It's the first time they come, they're beginners, regardless of if they're 60 years old, doesn't matter, or 40 years old or 20 years old. They're all starting at the same basic level of they don't understand what modern day coaching is all about. So we start off at the beginning level for everybody, right? All right. Components include, all right, so here's an example. Subject matter might be driving a car, okay? And the level of mastery is beginner. Flashbacks coming back. Okay, so the components that included are really simplistic in terms of, adjusting the seat, adjusting the mirrors, getting inside the vehicle and making sure that you have the right kind of visibility and, physicality of being high enough in the seat or whatever, back enough to be able to be comfortable in driving a car. Backing up out of a driveway, very important. Driving in an open parking lot, not on a street yet. They're not ready for that, and the world's not ready for them to be out there. But find a big parking lot that doesn't have any cars in it, hopefully not too many telephone or light poles. Have them drive around, get comfortable, going around in circles. Parking, and more advanced parallel parking. So you break it down into the various little chunks, and then as they practice those things and they do them well, wow, that was spectacular. You look behind you to see if you could turn into that parking spot. You turn the wheels in the proper location so you came into the parking lot, and then you straightened it out again so that you could be parallel to the curb. Now, that might take 10 times, it might take 20 times, but you break it down into those little components and acknowledge the parts that they're doing well. Not the fact that they hit the hay bale or the cardboard box or the whatever it is that you put there to simulate another car. They know that they hit the box. They don't need to tell them again. It's like, oh, damn. I just ran over dad's old car. Oops. They know that. Harp on what they did well. You turned around and looked. You cut it. You cut in at a good angle. You came into parallel and do whatever it is that they actually did well, that they actually got, quote, right. Yeah. Step 3. Another example, subject matter is the listening as a coach. It's an advanced level of mastery. And so the components are the coach's mindset. It's the what and the who. In other words, a professional coach is responsible for not just what the client wants to accomplish, the what, the scenario, the situation, the obstacle, the whatever, the what. Okay, definitely talk about that, but it's not the only thing. It's also who they are as a human being. So it's the who and the what. Doesn't have to be 50-50, but did the coach talk and inquire with the client about the situation, the what, and about them as a person? So how are you reacting to this? How do you want to prepare yourself for this conversation, whatever that might be? And when that is noticeable, where the coach student, the more advanced coach student has done that, Then I acknowledge it. Wow, fantastic. Well done. The use of silence. Did they use the use of silence, or are they still in that kind of beginner mindset of I've got to fill the space, the client's not talking, I need to tell them what to do or how to do it, or I got to come up with something? Are they comfortable, the coach, the advanced coach, comfortable with having a client in a place of silence and just let them reflect, think, ponder, maybe go deeper? It is maybe the least used masterful skill that professional coaches struggle with, because this is such a freaking noisy world of multitasking that it can take a coach a year long to get comfortable with silence and holding that space for a client. Yeah. Quite an advanced skill, actually. It seems simple, but it's not. Partnering. How do I partner with a client without dragging them along, without pushing them, without directing them, without my good opinions on what they should do, et cetera, et cetera. And then even further than that, intuitive listening. I've got an inner ear, inner sense of there's something else that's it seems like it's going on here, and I can't put my finger on it, but some people will see images or words will come through, and to be completely unattached to whether it speaks to the client or not, and brave enough to share it. So you have all these different components, again, that I can listen to as an observer and acknowledge the coach for when I see those showing up. Wow, that was fantastic. Yeah. What else we got here? All right, so here's the three again. Attitude, what mindset is necessary for this particular topic at this particular level of mastery? What's the mind? Here's a classic example, is that I can give two people a hammer, and I'm going to just arbitrarily say person one has a mindset of, oh, good, I have something to tear this old shack down. Right? So you give them a tool to tear it down. So their mindset is destruction, to deconstruct, right? The second person says, oh, wow, super, I've got a hammer now. My mindset is I like to build things. Their mindset, along with the hammer, is going to be for construction. Two different mindsets, exact same hammer, exact same skill, but using two entirely different methodologies and uses that's dictated by the original mindset. It is major and mostly overlooked in all education, my experience. Knowledge, what do they need to know? Well, they need to know how to drive a nail. They need to know how to have it be plumb. In other words, have it be straight up, right? 180 degrees or a 90-degree angle, right? So all the walls are, straight up as opposed to leaning in. They need to know how to measure. They need to know how to square, right? So if you're building a house or you're building a square, the measurement from one corner to the opposite corner vis-a-vis the other corner to the opposite corner have to be equal. That's how it's square. If it's not square, or it's not exact same measurement from this way to this way, it's not square. Okay. Now, if you've never been into construction or into building something like that, then you don't know that. So that you have to know that. You can't even build a simple box without that principle, without that knowledge. And in skill, what do you need to be able to do and demonstrate? Well, you need to be able to cut the board. You need to be able to do that, not cut your finger. You need to be able to do that, and you need to know how to attach, one piece of wood to the other, etc. Or again, whatever the topic might be. So these are the things now, when I see an attitude, I see a knowledge being demonstrated or brought to the session, or a skill that is congruent with the topic and the level of mastery. Ta-da. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. So I've been talking for a long time here. We're about halfway through. I want to open this up and have a conversation about, number one, what do you want to teach? What are you currently teaching? What subject matter? What level of mastery? Some of the things that we've gone through here. Let me come just out of, there we go. And I got Rajan and Jen. Oh, good, Jen. I haven't seen Jen for a while. Rajiv, super. Saraswati, Vivek. Yay. Hey, Jen. You looking perky today? So who would like to share about either questions about anything I've just shared, or the application of this, or how was it like for you to be inside of an inspired learning model where you were mostly acknowledged and celebrated, as opposed to, you didn't quite get that right, you didn't do that right, you didn't do that right, you didn't do that right. Or how you could apply this to a class, an area of education or learning or training that you are wanting to bring to your part of the world. So I know I just stacked about 16 questions, and that's really horrible as a coach. So let me come back. My number one question is, what part of this would you like to talk about? Jen, yeah.
It's interesting that you leaned into the acknowledgement, because through the coach training, we always heard that acknowledgement was important. And so, I mean, I was doing that, and then I changed coaches, and the way she acknowledges me is so strategic, so from 1,000 miles looking down at like the whole session. It's given me a new understanding of how powerful acknowledgement can be. So I feel like in a way that's sort of what you're underscoring, because it's very supportive of the person's journey. I hope that's supportive for the people on the call.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Here's the practical part of that from my perspective, is that I think by focusing on, again, not every single educator in the entire world, I'm not gonna throw them under the bus and say, you haven't acknowledged properly. And I'm going to say that my experience is by not acknowledging what I got right. And I don't care if it's second grade arithmetic or high school mathematics, trigonometry, or university, manufacturing, plant, principles of whatever. Then what happens is that I get focused on what I didn't get right, number one, but I've been robbed of the opportunity to be reinforced for the things that I did get right. And because learning is messy, learning is fragile at the beginning of any kind of learning, then the things I did well, by not being reinforced, I forget that I don't even know that I've done them right. All I know is I didn't do 3 things well. By switching that around to acknowledging what you did well, those get reinforced. And that's why learning builds faster. Oh, wow. I didn't realize I was doing that well. Is that important to this subject? Yes, it's very important to this subject. Wow, okay. Put me back in, coach, right? I'm ready to play. Let me try again. And it adds to the natural enthusiasm of learning. My mom and dad were highly educated people. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was a university graduate from a Ivy League school in New England. And they kept on talking about the love of lifelong learning, and I didn't I did not get it. I did not get it. But the truth is, learning is exciting. Every human being, if I had a proclamation today and say, okay, the whole world, you cannot learn anything in the next 24 hours. Sorry. You just have to take a hiatus. You have to take time out. You cannot learn anything about anybody in the next 24 hours. That's an impossible thing because of our human curiosity. What I can do is slow learning down. I can retard it. I can get in the way of it. I can deactivate the excitement of learning by critiquing, by not celebrating the learning that is already there and being demonstrated. Absolutely. So thank you, Jen. Thank you. Rajan, let me bring you into.
One of the things that you talked about, intuitive listening.
Yeah.
Now, broadly, one may guess what it is, but how to learn, master, and teach others, because this is one area in which there may not be any codified body of knowledge, or at least I don't know that. I mean, how does one get into this intuitive part of listening? And are there any ground rules or any steps, or is there any structure for that? Or
I think that the inspired learning model would apply to that area as well. It is a much advanced mastery level, as you indicate. I believe that everybody has the capacity for intuitive listening. And I can also tell you that it's hardly ever acknowledged or emphasized in Western education. Because it's not tangible. Like you say, it's mushy. It's like how do I get my hands around that? Well, I don't get my hands around that, as the case may be, is the case. And yet all the philosophers and the wise men of the world have talked about the inner knowingness. Well, then how do you get to that? Well, you get through that through meditation, you get that through prayer, you get that through the whirling dervishes. You get, there's many methodologies that have been taught to us that's available for that inner knowingness to be louder, clearer, more poignant. And so again, let me take that from a model of inspired learning, is that the Tai Chi master or the meditation master or the yoga master will continue to say, okay, so what is your body saying to you? What's coming through? How do you develop that intuitiveness of it wasn't talked about straight on, but you're getting an intuition that your neighbor a half a mile down the road needs extra support. Now, you haven't seen that neighbor in, who knows? Haven't had a direct conversation with them maybe in 2 years. But there's something that's calling you in a way that you don't even know how or why. Huh. Maybe I need to reach out to them today. Offer them any support that they may need. Now, the cultivation of that can be acknowledged, especially in a organized program for coaching, yoga, meditation, prayer, dance, movement, that when the student starts, because there's some languaging around this as well that takes place that I've experienced. I'm getting an inkling, and I'm not quite sure, I don't know the origin of it, but I'm getting an inkling, just because my energy field and my client's energy field are so closely coming together in this sacred space. I'm picking up vibes, I'm picking up energy, I'm picking up ethereal, I don't know, I can't describe it, but I'm picking up a wisdom or awareness that I can't describe as to how or why I'm picking it up. And when I'm working with a coach that I am mentoring, and I notice that they have this capacity, and we may have talked about it earlier in terms of how did you know how to ask that question? Now that I've actually had that where students have said, where the hell did you come up with that question, Peter? Because the client had not said anything about it. The client, it was in the field that I could pick up vibrationally, intuitively. And so I came in with a question about that kind of was meaningful to them. And that's you're picking a high level of mastery here in terms of how do we teach it? Number one is encourage it. Say again, make that part of the competencies. That is, if you want to be a masterful coach or a masterful listener, you must develop and allow that internal, original, innate capacity that I believe every human being has, is to have that intuitive listening and to be connected at that ethereal level, the spiritual level, vibrational level, and encourage that, the development of that. Now, I don't know if that does that answer your question. It's a very profound question, actually.
One of the things that I sense from what you said is perhaps how do I train myself to be having an empty mind to begin with, in the sense that complete slate, I mean, wiped clean.
Yeah.
And curiosity.
Love that.
And the realization that I don't know, and I'm only probing.
Yeah.
So these are the small things which are coming to mind. So, but
Stunning. I agree with all of that. Again, going back to the basic mindset of this is, I am not here to fix this person. I mean, that's one of the fundamental mindsets of a professional coach. It may not be a fundamental mindset of a parent. Fundamental mindset of most parents I know is I'm here to protect my young son and daughter from the hurts and the evils of the world. But as a professional coach, my mindset is the person, the client that's in front of me, that I'm working with, is resourceful, complete, and whole. And it's their work to do when they want to do it, how deep they want to do it. And I'm holding a space for them to do their precious work. Okay, so that's my version, Peter Redding's version of coach's mindset. With that openness, that space, there is a an invitation to the client, and the client knows and can feel whether I hold that space or not, by the way. If they think that I'm judging, they'll shut down, because then they start judging themselves. But as I can hold that space as cleanly as you've just described it, Rajan, I'm a blank slate. And I'm here to support you to be all that you can be, want to be, ready to be in our time together today.
But
Stunning.
how does one balance that against the so-called performance anxiety, especially in a corporate coaching environment where the sponsor also wants certain deliverables within certain time frame, because that's a competing and a sometimes contradictory kind of.
Very, very contradictory. Yeah, and I think that's why coaching has grown as to the place it has in the last 25 years, because it's so rare. What I offer as a coach, they cannot get from their HR department. They can't get from their L&D department. They can't get from their mentoring. Because of all the other trappings of, we want you to grow faster. We want you to be a senior VP by the time you're 32 years old now. You've got to get on your way. You've got to learn this, this, and this in the next 4 years. Now, maybe 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, 4 decades ago, people had more time to develop. We don't have time for you to develop and slow, like that. So we're pushing you. We're prodding you. We want you to succeed. We want you to elevate. And maybe they're ready for that, and maybe they're not. Maybe I burned them out, and now they're a senior VP at 32 years old. They're as smart as a whip. They've gone through all the programs in the world to be the highest technology person that they can be. They have a PhD in nano whatever, and they're a miserable human being. I think that's sad. That makes, almost brings tears to my eyes. So it is a departure and a conscious departure. This is not about competition. This is maybe you get what you need to know in the next 12 coaching sessions, and maybe you don't, and that's okay. That has to be okay with the coach. That has to be okay with the person bringing in professional coaching to the organization. If you're bringing in coaching now so that they can be more competitive, that's one reason to bring it in. But they won't get the full value out of it. The funny thing about all of this is that this is not new information. How long has the field of meditation been being perfected? Over how many centuries? As many as we know, recorded history, right? The beginning of man. Yeah, now, is that terribly competitive? My Buddhist monk is better than your Buddhist monk. Yeah, well, I don't think so. It's like, yeah. But I love your logic, Rajan. I do. All right. You want to add any other thoughts or words of wisdom, Rajan? I'm thoroughly enjoying your inquiries. All right, we'll move on then. Vivek, Saraswati, Rajiv, any of you would like to come into the fore here? We got about 10 minutes remaining. Rajiv?
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah.
All right. So, in fact, I was sitting quiet because there was so much to share, and I resonated with your, inspired learning model so much. So let me begin by sharing, my experience. I am also a recruiter, so I've been in a recruiting profession for almost last 25 years, and I have my own recruiting company. And as a result of that, training recruiters is one of the things which I continue to do. So when I was listening to your model of attitude, skill, knowledge, and having an end in mind, and then so now what has happened is in last 2 years, prior to that, we were all working together in an office, and now we have become an work from home kind of an environment. So earlier the training was different, while there were people to help, there was a lot of learning, peer learning also happening. And but now as people are working from home, we have to change our teaching model so we hire non-recruiters and train them into recruiters. And so here we do this is that the mindset, basically there are a lot of things. I don't know how culturally it is in different part of the world, but in India one mindset that we train people is to not to treat candidate like commodities, right? So look at them as a human being and understand their needs, respect their needs, and see whether they are good for the job and job is good for them. Not just to ensure that they are good for our business, but overall have their well-being also. So that's something which we train as a mindset part of our learning.
Excellent.
Second skill, knowledge, obviously, how to make calls, how to interview candidates, how to use different models to qualify good candidates for our clients. And knowledge, of course, we do a lot of hiring for IT industry. So knowledge of the industry, the software development life cycle, and etc. So all those knowledge is also something which we impart. So when you were talking about that, I was kind of validating, okay, am I doing all of this in my training? And I think I was so happy to hear your inputs, and I said, I think we are on the right track. And it actually helped because we were now work from home and virtual training was very difficult. And so we have completed almost 3 batches of recruiter training now, and we see much better results because we were continuing to have our same training program as we used to have while we were working offline. But things have changed, and now this different training module which we have come up with, it's really helping. And I think it absolutely aligns with the inspired learning thing that you spoke about. We
Excellent.
are reinforcing what they really know, and then we teach them what is the gap. And I see the learning after a month's training, we see that productivity is much higher than what we used to get earlier in our attempt to train people. So
well done.
Yeah,
well done. Yeah, as you're going through that, my brain is racing as far as what they need to know. Well, they need to know all the acronyms. They need to know all the technologies. If you're recruiting for, C# and you don't know what that is, and you think it's the same as C++, it's like you have a disconnect here.
Yeah.
So the technology part of it, the what is the company interested in beefing up in terms of their technical skills? And if you don't know that language, quite literally, then you're going to send candidates that are inappropriate for that company.
Yeah.
So just a ton of specificity wise knowledge that is appropriate to a recruiter at all the different elements, right? If it's a managerial, you need to understand the managerial competencies. You need to understand that language. You need to understand their mindset. You need to understand the need of the companies at that managerial level, or that visionary level, or that execution level, and the nuances between the three. Otherwise, you send the wrong person, the wrong candidate to the company, and they say, yeah, but that's not what we asked for. Maybe in 10 years, this guy will have the chops to handle 5,000 employees, globally around the world, but right now, no. So great job. Well done. I can
Yeah.
see that you're very pleased with yourself, and rightfully so.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Peter, I also want to add, what Mr. Rajan Sinha has spoken about intuitive listening.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that was a very profound question, and I will just want to add 2 bits from my side.
Sure.
I think this is such an important skill as a coach, beingness of the coach, an intuitive listening or an active listening, as we use it in the markers.
Yeah.
It's a game changer as far as coaching, being a coach is concerned. So one thing which I practice to get better at it, I think one way which works for me is to be awareness about yourself. I think the way I know when I'm losing that ability to intuitive listen or actively listen is when my mind starts thinking or analyzing what my client has said, or starts thinking of what next questions I may have to, what next question should I ask. When such things come in the way, I think an intuitive listening gets compromised completely.
Yeah.
Being with the client, as if I normally give this analogy of a cat looking at the a mouse hole, right? The person is so active, is so present, and all ready to pounce. So there is no distraction at all. A complete attention on one
complete
at that
focus.
time, yeah.
Right.
So I think building that awareness is according to me one way of building that competency of intuitive listening, being aware of yourself. And like you rightly said, meditation or all those exercises where you are within yourself, and you know your you know yourself in those activities really helps while to build that competency.
Well, on that note, we're going to complete the program, and we've got about 1 minute to do a wrap. But the sense of ownership, the sense of beingness, the sense of holding this space for another human being. And you're right. If I am preoccupied with what's the next question I'm going to ask, then I've just left that. I've abandoned that space for the client to be completely open and free to go wherever they want. All right, so let me do a quick wrap here. Next week, same time, same station, we're going to be talking about what are we talking about? The facilitator. The facilitator. So you don't want to miss that. We're going to continue our series of the inspired learning model. I've loved all the contributions. Please come back. I love the conversations that we had today. And with that, I'm going to wish you, as I always do, God bless, namaste, be safe. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.